Okay. We're fine? Okay. Cyclone Yasi continues to be on track to cross the Queensland coast around midnight, and it's maintaining its intensity as a Category 5 cyclone. It has, however, slowed down slightly over the last couple of hours and is now travelling at about 25 kilometres an hour. If it did continue to slow, there would be two effects of that. Firstly, it would mean that the storm surges would be further away from the high tide and would be lower than we have been currently predicting. In terms of flood, inundation and storm surges, that would be a good thing. However, if it is crossing the coast at a slower rate, then that means it will sit over towns and communities for longer and bring those destructive winds to those communities for a longer period of time. So rather than moving quickly across them, it will sit and cause more destruction from wind. So whichever way we go with this cyclone, we are going to see devastating impacts, whether it's from wind or the tidal storm surges. We have continued to see a very strong wave action in some of those areas south of where we anticipate it will cross, which remains the Innisfail to Cardwell area. I talked earlier about record wave heights being recorded at Townsville. This afternoon there was a record height of 6.6 metres being recorded, the largest since records have been kept in 1975. Just about half an hour ago, they recorded a wave height of 9.5 metres off Townsville. That's 2.9 metres higher than it was when measured this afternoon. So we are seeing very strong wave activity off the seas of Townsville. That obviously will translate into significant flooding activity at some point in some of those low-lying areas. The number of people who are without power in this region has almost doubled since my last report, with 61,000 customers now offline. So we are starting to see the rate of power failure considerably accelerate. It's still relatively quiet and calm out there in terms of calls to emergency workers. We are starting to see calls coming in, but only about 150 across the region. So that's very low levels of activity, and we are expecting that will grow, particularly around that area, Innisfail, Cardwell and related areas.
And what sort of things have people been asking for, Penny?
This is just a record of how many people have rung the SES hotline, so this will be a range of calls, people ringing to say that they are experiencing high winds, or people saying that they are that they might have started to see their roofs peel off or windows smash. So it'll be the full range of household damages. Did you want to add to that?
Oh, certainly, and things like trees down. We're hearing lots of stories about that, so I'm sure that they'll be the type of calls coming in through this.
But no cries for help at this stage?
Unfortunately, we've heard our first call from Port Hinchinbrook from a person who rang up and said that they need to evacuate. All we can do is provide them our support now and certainly advice on what they should do in relation to sheltering in place. But this is the first call.
There's nothing you can do to help this particular person?
Not at all. All we're asking them to do is to go to the safest part of their house and bunker down.
Conditions are now...
to people balancing these huge surges that are going to swamp towns like that with the clear instruction that it's too dangerous to be outside and you should stay put. For people who refuse to evacuate and stay in those low areas, what advice can you give them now?
The only advice we can give them is the advice that we've given all the way through, all the hints on how to try and protect themselves as best they can at this stage, because they can't go outside. That is too high risk, and we can't send people to them.
In this specific instance, will you continue to monitor this person's safety?
Yes, while we can still communicate with that particular person, that's right, but we don't know how long that will be.
Can you just clarify, is that an area where you urge people to evacuate?
I'd have to double check that. I know that this person's in a two-storey area because we've told them to get up to the higher story, so I'm suggesting that it is probably one of the inundation areas, but I'll check that and provide that information.
Is it a family that's involved?
I don't know that. I've only just got this call from our people to say they've had that call at Innisfail.
And it is very distressing, and we do expect to get more calls like this, but the time has now passed when it is safe for emergency workers to respond to these sorts of calls. We are now seeing winds across these areas of more than 120 kilometres an hour. We're seeing torrential rain, and we are seeing the beginnings of some serious wave activity. These are not conditions in which we can send out emergency workers. These are not conditions where you can put up a helicopter to do a winch rescue. All of that is now beyond the realms of possibility. So we are going to see, I think, more distressed phone calls, and it's going to be very difficult for our emergency workers and the people in our call centre. People often forget about them, but the people who hear the first calls of distress are the people who answer our phones, and they'll be doing it tough tonight.
The massive wave at Townsville, that is just enormous. Is the warning to people that as much as you can forecast what it might be, that it could be even worse?
The fact that we've seen a high wave registered on the gauge out off the Point Cleveland in Townsville does not necessarily translate to a 9-metre wave coming in onto Townsville's foreshore, but it just is indicative of how high these seas are, and by the time they hit land that they will be, we expect, to match what our predictions were. The only thing that will temper that is if the cyclone continues to slow a little and comes across later, because that will mean that it'll be further away from that high tide.
The 61,000 homes, do you know roughly what areas they are?
Most of them continue to be in and around that Innisfail, Cardwell area, but we have substantial suburbs in Cairns and Townsville out. A number of those include areas outside of the danger zone in Proserpine, Airlie Beach, where we saw many homes go out this afternoon because even 80-kilometre winds this afternoon took down power lines there.
The wave measuring device, is that on the seaward side of Magnetic Island, and would you expect Magnetic Island to mitigate the size of the wave?
Certainly, if you know the shape of the bay at Townsville, it's on the southern side. It's outside of the point, the main point of that, so it's quite some distance from Magnetic Island. But that's indicative of the wave sizes that would be on the seaward side of Magnetic at this time. And remember, we've still got 4 hours to go probably until we see the highest winds, the highest waves.
So would you expect that wave to hit Magnetic Island before it hits the Townsville area?
Waves of that height will now be hitting that side of the seaward side of Magnetic Island, yes, because that's where the waves are being registered out to sea at that level.
So far, so good for phone systems?
As far as we know, yes.
We haven't had any reports yet of any mobile phone towers down, and we're still able to make contact on the normal mobile network with the senior people in each district who are reporting into us, so that's good.
Has Magnetic Island got emergency staff on the island?
Certainly there are police there, absolutely, and obviously they've been instructed to care for the community in the same way as we have everywhere. But again, I mean, they're in the same boat. Everyone has moved up to high ground to either shelter with friends or family or other places on the island that was available to them. The ferries, I think, only stopped running yesterday.
And of course Palm Island is a little further to the north and closer to the critical danger zone, but out in a similar, a little bit further out to sea. Okay.